Annie.
Yeah, okay. So welcome everybody, Thursday evening or Thursday lunchtime or whatever, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Thursday Garden Chat, our weekly public service broadcast. And I'm just going to do a little bit about what's been going on before Noel introduces our guest tonight. So we had a fantastic live event on Monday this week at Knepp Walled Garden with James Hitchmo and Charlie Harper, the head gardener at Knepp. Which was fantastic. The weather was a little bit dubious, but it wasn't too bad. Knepp's looking, or the wall garden is looking really stunning. Because of the spring that we've had. So it was a really, really good day. And I'm hoping that we can repeat this next year, but perhaps do something over the seasons maybe. But if you haven't been to Knepp Wall Garden, it's definitely worth a visit. So we're in the middle of our live event season. So we still have to come in a couple of weeks' time. We will be in the Netherlands at Mien Rouse's garden, which I'm very, very excited about. It is a centenary for part of the garden, and so it's a lovely year to be doing something there. And we will have Julia Crawford, who's the author of the English biography of Mien Rouse, and Monique, who's the garden director. So there'll be a sort of workshop part of the day. So if anybody is in the position to come to the Netherlands in a couple of weeks' time, go onto our events page, and you will link through to Angela, who is in charge of sorting all of this out for us in the Netherlands. We'd love to see you because there are still a few places left. We also have an event at the wonderful John Little's extraordinary sort of laboratory type landscape in Essex, and John is just evangelical about growing in different mediums, and so we'll be enjoying a day there. Again, there are some places left on that. We have the second of our White House Farm visits coming up, the midsummer, where we'll be focusing on hydrangeas. This is an amazing arboretum in Kent with Maurice Foster, who has recently written a book on hydrangeas and has bred a series of hydrangeas as well. So it is one of those wonderful hidden secrets that we want to expose and let people know about. But definitely, if you are in the opportunity, you are in the position to come along, that's an afternoon visit. And then we have the third in our series of visits, or sorry, the second in our series of visits to the plant library, which is Tom and Sue Stewart Smith's home garden up in Hertfordshire. Again, an extraordinary opportunity to study and look at perennials in a sort of, again, like a laboratory type approach. It's wonderful. The thought process behind it's really interesting, and another sort of workshop based there. So have a look at our events pages, and if you're not able to come, obviously this is not webinar time. Our webinar season is during the autumn and winter, but we have plenty of wonderful recorded webinars for you to go and delve into in our archive, and again, on our YouTube channel, all the Thursday Garden Chats, or most of the Thursday Garden Chats that we have recorded in the past. So lots to see over, if you're not in the same country or the same continent as we are at this point in time. This Thursday Garden Chats are free to view service that we offer, and our speakers come along and give their time for free as well. So we always say, if you are in a position to offer any donation towards this to keep the wheels rolling on Garden Masterclass, we would be very happy, as it does cost money to do what we do in terms of all our offerings. Anyway, there we go. That's sort of all the news and views at the moment. I'm going to pass over to Noel, who's going to introduce tonight's guest.
Great, thank you, Annie. Thank you.
Okay.
So tonight we are going back to the Czech Republic. I say back because I think it's 2 years ago we had Adam Baroš from the Silver Taruka Institute talking about the remarkable horticultural heritage of the Czech Republic and the research that he's doing. So we've got another Czech researcher today, except he's actually American, and he's a plant ecologist, but he started off with an arts training. And I think it's always really interesting to meet people in the science world who have either an artistic sensibility or they also have an arts training to sort of bridge that that sort of cultural gap between the arts and the sciences, but also in terms of how information is presented. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking to Curtis about. So now, Curtis, tell us about your background. You're being brought up in the US and your original academic training.
Yeah, so I grew up in the US, and actually my parents, my father had a bit of an arts background, and I was sort of raised around it, and that was part of what got me into an arts degree. Though I had also really loved science, so obviously that does come back into play. Um, and so I did my bachelor's studies with a focus on ceramics and also oil paint. Pretty much I loved anything that was really messy and could get your hands very dirty. And I still really love ceramics. And I did really grow up around ceramics a lot. And that hands-on nature very much probably in line with the type of work that I'm doing now. And I talk about clay soils a lot, so probably some overlap there as well.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so I've finished with this degree. I was really passionate about it, but this was around 2008 in the United States. It wasn't the best time to have an arts degree. So I did a little bit the starving artist thing, and involved with different programs that were sort of available and running at the time. I was living in Chicago. They have an excellent park system and a lot of really great events that I was involved with there. But I did eventually decide that maybe it'd be nice to have something a little bit more stable. And I'd always loved science, and so I decided to go back for a science degree. And as Noel mentioned, I think that art and science are very similar in a lot of ways, and part of that is the intellectual aspect of it, not just all this thinking and processing, but also the author. There's an authorship in both of these. We're frequently talking about art, famous artists and their work and their eye and their process, and it's nearly identical for science as well. And yeah, I mean, every time you look at an article or some book or something, there's the list of authors right there. So having that kind of creative drive and presence was also that was a good through line for me in going on to this other subject. And so particularly my first interest and reason to go into science was actually invertebrate zoology. Invertebrates, I'm talking to a bunch of gardeners now, so you're probably not the biggest fans of a lot of them, but they're very interesting, diverse in their body plans, as you see all the time. And there's also a connection to the environment. There's a vulnerability there. They might have different permeabilities of their skin. They're much more readily affected by toxins or different salinity, things like this, which is also very present for plants. And this connection, this vulnerability to the environment was also something that I was really interested in. So as I was doing my studies and going along through this, I had the realization that really plants were a better fit for me than animals. Part of that is because what's so cool to me about the diversity of animals is there are many different body plans. You've got, worms, jointed legs, very different types of legs and mobility, all these different kinds of sessile organisms. And then when you start looking to the kind of work you can do at a comparative level, it's a little bit tricky. Whereas when we start looking at plants, especially herbaceous perennial plants, which are my personal preference, so it looks like I might be in good company, we have incredible diversity, even, at the meter plot level. You can have so many different forms and aspects of spread or longevity of the whole below ground of the plant or part of the plant. You've got this strong turnover of these different parts. And that's really remarkable to see that in play and coexistence. And then when we start looking more broadly, across the globe to very different habitats, you'll see very different structures and ways of living and being and building the plant body in one place versus another. So yeah, that's I hope that makes sense. That was kind of what did it for me.
And I then understand that you then did, you did a PhD in New Zealand?
So yeah, I did my master's. So I did my bachelor's in Pennsylvania, my master's in New Zealand, and my PhD in sort of southern Canadian region. And now I'm in Czech Republic. So I've also had quite a temperate region sampler platter. So I've seen quite a lot of going from, and I was in Auckland. So this, in some ways nearly, more approaching the tropical, especially with some of the flora that you have growing there, and some of the introduced species that really flourish in Auckland, New Zealand. And then here in Czech Republic, we're relatively mild, but there's definitely this seasonality and these relatively cold winters. And then where I was in Canada has intense seasonality. So that's also been a really nice part of being an ecologist and getting to travel around, and especially spending years at a time in these really different places and seeing what the plants are doing. And in some ways, I think feeling what's going on. Even with my colleagues and especially my supervisor at the time in my PhD, I was very much emphasizing the seasonality aspect a lot, especially in my work and developing my project in a way that maybe he wouldn't, having lived there for a long time. But my body was trying to get used to the intense seasonality, the very warm summers, very cold winters, and the transitions between them. Not my favorite thing, but a good learning experience.
So what were you looking at in your PhD research?
So I studied under Hugh Henry, who is an expert in winter ecology. And even before we met, I already knew that I really wanted to learn more about both functional ecology, connections to plants in how they survive and deal with stress, and especially this connection to the below ground structures. And that it was a perfect system in winter, because especially for these herbaceous perennials, what you have left is the below ground. So we developed some experiments and different ways at looking at what the below ground means to plants as they're overwintering. In particular, I was looking at depth, growing depth. So as plants are overwintering in the soil, they are protected by the snow layer, litter layer, and also any of the soil that is above them. So, of course, with greater depth, they will be more protected, but there's also the time spent to sort of grow and compete once the nice conditions have come in. So quite an obvious thing that should be there, but it hadn't necessarily been looked at, and it's very difficult to do because plants are growing pretty much at one depth, and these kinds of manipulative experiments are a bit tricky. So we actually had, just to look at this one thing, 3 different experiments going. And so this is something that would be really well understood for geophytes, so plants that are growing very deep in the soil, especially different bulbous perennials, different structures like that, lots of different types of rhizomes. But this is where I was in Canada, but the same is true here as well. A lot of different places. Most of the plants are not geophytes. They are not growing very deep. And so they're called hemicryptophytes. So they've got their buds and most overwintering structures right below the soil surface. So they're especially vulnerable, but they're also especially there primed for fast growth in when comfortable conditions come back, basically.
Right, right. Yeah, so I was doing a PhD at the University of Sheffield in the kind of round about, I suppose, 2004 to 2007. And obviously, one of the things you do is this literature review, and you just plow through all the stuff in the university library, when the sort of bowels of the university library, which is, I just love places like that, where and part of it is, the serendipity of coming across things that you didn't expect to find, which you can't possibly, well, you not so easily done online. And what I was looking at was really looking at the ornamental herbaceous vegetation, applying basic plant ecology, particularly around competition, to ornamental herbaceous vegetation, where we're looking at growing plants in much greater proximity than would have been done in conventional horticulture, because we're looking at where in ecological planting design we're leaving horticulture behind, and we're moving into ecology, and in many ways we know very little about these plants we grow. And one of the and you sort of plow through all this stuff, all these journals, and there's certain names that come up again and again. And for us, of course, at Sheffield, it was J. Philip Grime. You're smiling there, or the author of the competitor stress-tolerant ruderal way of looking at plants, which has proved, enormously successful. I mean, that's been a very useful tool, I think, for people in horticulture and landscape to approach plants and plant communities and selecting species. But then another name I came up again and again was two authors, Klimesh and Klimeshova. Obviously a husband and wife team in somewhere in Czech or Slovak Republic, turned out to be Czech, and some really interesting work on clonality, because of course if you're working with perennials, clonality is in a way the secret weapon which makes so many perennials really useful and dynamic and robust. So you of course are working with Jitka Klimeshova. How did you get to meet her and work in the Czech Republic?
Yeah, so a big part of what led me to even a bigger emphasis and enthusiasm with working with plants was during my master's. I wanted to apply functional ecology, so different types of understanding and measuring traits, different characteristics of plants that would then tell us how successful or adapted or responsive they are to different environmental stressors, processes, etc. And one of these types is clonality and the below ground structures. And really the name, the person who literally wrote the book on it is Jitka Klimeshova. And she was quite instrumental and there with Leos Klimesh at the beginnings of a lot of really important developments and processes in understanding plant clonality. A number of important books coming in from the 80s and 90s. And then she's continued working with various people over the years. And she has also the clonal plant database, CLOPLA, which is currently being updated. So this is of clonal traits of plants for Central Europe. And it will very soon be showing quite a lot more than just Central Europe. And yeah, so she has some main ways that she describes the bodies of plants. So rhizomes are now under her rubric, which is partially borrowing from Serebyakov, is epigeogenous and hypogeogenous. So these are different processes telling us how the rhizomes are formed and how the plant maintains its position within the soil. And also a lot of other very interesting things that we have coming in, with especially some new work by Jana Martinkova, who is also working in the lab of Yitka, and whose name you undoubtedly also remember from some noteworthy work from her. And so what it really opened my eyes. It was an amazing new world, new way of understanding these different forms and bodies and their coexistence, and what these bodies mean for the environment and for the plants. And it was certainly a big inspiration of looking further below ground for my PhD. And during my PhD, I learned that she had a field course called Go Below Ground. And it was the first year, I believe it was in 2017. And so I came to my supervisor in Canada, said, Hugh, can I please go to the Czech Republic to study more about below ground organs? And he had heard me talking about her and her work and below ground organs nonstop for 2 years. And he said yes. And so very thankfully, I was able to go for this rather intense but enjoyable week-long course with her. And then just a couple years after that, I was able to get back in contact when she was looking for some people for the lab, and was able to join. And so I've been here for almost 5 years now, working on a wide range of subjects. She's ever expanding the range of traits that we're trying to look at to understand these plants. And so certainly she has a very strong background in morphological traits. So these different traits describing the bodies and how they grow and their different shapes. But we've also had a lot of work looking inward, both in plant anatomy, so the internal structures, using different types of visualization methods. And some really interesting things that we've got there, though it's still quite new. And also what she had been further developing, and that I've been actually working a lot with since I've gotten here, is storage carbohydrates. So the different types of carbohydrates that the plants are using to store in. So obviously there's starch, but there's also a wide range of other types of carbohydrates that have this more plastic ready type of utilization. And they're very important for many different types of processes for the plant, including stress mediation. And so that's been just really, really fascinating. And it's very difficult to measure and collect, but we're working to expand the collection of these traits that we have, and to know more and more. And yeah, it's quite an interesting avenue there.
Yes. And of course, when I was researching my PhD in these papers by Klimisch and Klimashova, and then I thought about a year ago, I thought I'd reconnect with some of the research I was looking at, and we only had papers by Jitka, by Klimashova. What happened to Leos Klimesh? Because this is rather a tragic story.
Yeah. A bit before my time coming here, but so he was very involved in a lot of work in the Himalayas in Ladakh, which is continued to this day, especially by Yiji Dolezal, another name that you would recognize from a lot of the below ground work. And he also worked with Yitka for a time. And he also works quite a lot with below ground organs and also anatomy and carbohydrates as well. And but yeah, so uh many years ago, Leos Klimesh did not return. He went missing on a trip to the Himalayas while in Ladakh. Yeah.
Ladakh, wasn't it? Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I mean, I think this is an opportunity just to remind ourselves just how dangerous, in fact, some botanical and other natural history research really is. I'm just reflecting on the number of people I've either known or have had dealings with who have simply disappeared. Was Jim Taggart of the Lynn Botanic Gardens in Scotland, who did not come back from Vietnam. His father was there waiting at Edinburgh Airport for him, and he never showed up. And search teams were sent out, and nothing has ever been found. Michael Wickenden, of course, who died, well, a great plant collector, one of the very few really good plant collectors of our era, dying in a remote part of Myanmar. Was it Myanmar or Thailand? Somewhere up there anyway a few years ago. And of course the terrible story of the Silver Hill seed collectors who were murdered in South Africa whilst doing their work. So when we when we last spoke, and we had some discussion about how good Central European plant ecology is. I mean, I feel I can hold up my end because we had J. Philip Grime with this really powerful concept. But Central European plant ecology is pretty damn good, and I think you very much felt it was much more advanced than in North America. And I mean, indeed, I don't want to sort of run down the fantastic work that's done by American plant ecologists, but there simply isn't the level of sophistication or development or probably funding for understanding plants and environments in the way we do. And one of my favorite books, and this might be my desert island book actually, thankfully translated into English, Heinz Ellenberg's Vegetation Ecology of Central Europe. I remember having a wonderful holiday with my wife we had several holidays in the Slovak Republic, actually, another story. We used to go there quite a bit, but having these lovely camping holidays in Slovakia in the late 90s, reading my way through Heinz Ellenberg. Wonderful. So tell us about why Central European plant ecology is so good.
So yeah, there is a very long history and quite intense development of different types of description and descriptive tools in Central Europe in general. I mean, especially certainly a lot going on in Germany and a lot going on here. When you're going through the literature, reading different plant traits, I mean, like dispersal syndromes, like a lot of the seed dispersal syndromes you'll be reading, it's actually German words. A lot of the main databases are European centered, and I believe TRI is centered, and then also there's the bioflora and a lot of traits that are through different German universities. I forget at this moment, which is bad because I've been working on it with some of their data quite recently. And then also we have here the work that Yitka has done on the below ground organs and describing Central European flora, and a lot of analytical tools as well. We've got a lot of really great people working with different types of statistics as well.
We hope that you are enjoying this recording from Garden Masterclass's Thursday Garden Chat program. We started doing this in April 2020 during the first COVID lockdown, when we did it 5 days a week for 2 months, which was a wonderful experience. Since then, we've carried on doing it just for one session a week. We have always done this as a public service. We initially started it as a morale booster for the garden and landscape industry during a very difficult time, and we've so loved doing it that we've carried on doing this. But our presenters give their time for free. We give our time for free. We do incur costs, administrative, technical, and sometimes for support staff, and we would very much appreciate the odd donation to help us keep going and help keep this a free service, which we'd very much like to do. So please go to our homepage, and down at the bottom there's a donate button, and we'll be very grateful. Thank you.
But yeah, the sheer amount to which things have been described, also phytosociological work, lots of really great people here in Czech Republic and in my own institute working on this. And yeah, so when I was working in New Zealand and in Canada, there was frequently some frustration because I would come across plants or be wanting to learn about plants or select plants for experiments, and we didn't really have the kind of descriptive tools that we needed, especially for the below ground. That was the most frustrating, because really in a lot of cases it was an absolute mystery and we did not know what was there. I remember for some of the native New Zealand flora that I had to look up, and I was very lucky to find some mention for some herbarium specimens what structures they had below ground, but really having to go at that kind of depth as opposed to all these different databases and the wealth of literature that we have coming from Central Europe, which is more of a one-stop shop to really find all of this information. And we definitely do rely on it as well. I see myself and a lot of colleagues frequently, oh, so we've got this site or this collection of flora or something, and we'd like to look at it. So yeah, we'll just take these leaf traits, below ground storage organs, Ellenberg indicator values, and all of these things, and you can start putting them together and getting this really full understanding of what the plants are doing. There's a lot of recent work as well that Jitka Klemešova, along with Tomáš Herbin, who also really some amazing below ground work that he's been working on, looking at really the whole flora of Czech Republic and the phylogenetic relationship and some of these transitions between different below ground storage organ types. So just really amazing to just take a flora and be able to analyze it. But you can do that here in Central Europe with relative ease.
Could you just explain briefly what an Ellenberg number is, and actually perhaps how useful that might be for those of us involved in plant specification?
So these are essentially optima, or could sort of be seen as preferences for different plant species, generally at the species level, for different types of environmental conditions. So particularly, we're often using moisture level. So the different moisture level Ellenberg indicator values would indicate if a plant likes it more wet or more dry, or these types of things. And they have it for even light availability. There's many different of these values available. And just on top of that, they've gone through, some people here in the Czech Republic, Milan Chytrý and others, did disturbance values as well. So just I forget what exactly they're called, but for indicators for disturbance frequency preferences, so optima, and also severity. And that's been some really interesting stuff to look at, especially when we're talking about below ground strategy. So looking at, we had a recent paper a couple years ago now, looking at response of plants looking at their optima, Ellenberg indicator values for these different environmental variables, and also disturbance frequency and its relationship to plant storage organ, the below ground organ of these perennial plants, persistence, and lateral spread in particular. So how much these are spreading through the soil. And we found, quite interestingly, that quite a lot of plants actually had this higher disturbance severity index value. So we're more preferring high disturbance with these longer spreading organs. So and that would be related to the fragmentation. And so that was an interesting thing that we found, and an interesting interplay with some of the other responses that we found regarding particularly disturbance frequency.
Yes, that's one of the things one of the bits of counterintuitive knowledge you have to acquire with ecological planting design, and in that disturbance can be a positive. We always think of disturbance as being quite negative, but very often habitats that experience a certain level of disturbance are simply much richer habitats.
Well, grasslands, herb-dominated habitats, my favorite place to work, these exist because of disturbance. There are things keeping the woody species away. So if that is here, we've got lots of meadows, so there's a mowing regime that is keeping that. But then also fire and freezing can be a big part of this as well.
And you've always very much stressed the importance of what goes on underground, which is something that, for fairly obvious reasons, we don't appreciate particularly well, and especially since nowadays, certainly if you're working with plants in the garden or landscape world, most plants come in a container, and you knock it out of its container, and you do not get to see the rhizomes or the root pattern or whatever it is you would have seen if you were planting bare roots. So one more factor that divorces us from making that connection with what goes on underground. Now you recently launched a blog to try to promote more awareness and interest of what goes on underground. So could you tell us about that blog and about some of the postings and contributions you've had?
Yeah. So myself and Yitka and a lot of my colleagues have been really frustrated, I think, similar with you, Noel, of how little their knowledge there is, and understanding, and sometimes appreciation of the below ground. And also from our side as researchers, we're also a little bit struggling with what a diverse area this is. So we're very focused on the below ground storage organs of plants, but there's also a wealth of literature, and certainly very complex dynamics going on with different traits, especially root traits that could be associated with foraging, or really the fine root traits related to acquisition of different resources. Of course, heavily related to mycorrhiza and different types of associations of that sort. And I was at a conference recently, really a below ground, at one of the sessions was about the below ground. And
I hope you met underground.
Not yet. Yeah, strangely, you say that. On the screen right now is an illustration that I did of my supervisor, Yitka, taking the metro to study plants below ground. So
actually, I once went to a camellia festival that was underground in Porto, in Portugal.
Well, that's
no
definitely
roots.
A next step. We'll have to do this.
Yeah.
But so Joanna Bergman gave this really excellent talk to sort of start things off, and her focus is definitely on root traits. And she really tried to bring all these different things together. talking about the work she's doing, other root work, the work that we're doing on below ground storage organs. And I really loved that. I thought we've got to have more of this. We've got to have more ways to sort of communicate and share among one another. So I started this blog with a lot of support from my supervisor and Plant Life Below Ground. And so it has quite a lot of my illustrations. I am constantly inspired by the below ground storage organs of plants and their bizarre little lives. And I am frequently drawing them, and frequently with faces, because I think that they're quite emotive, and their expressions need to be seen. But yeah, and so it's been only going for maybe 2-3 months now, but it's been really excellent experience getting to express more of what I'm seeing below ground, but also hearing from other people, including Noel, and really wonderful opportunity to to even share some of this stuff with you. And yeah, so it's a place to show photos, to show art, to talk about new research, new work that we've been doing in outreach. So I just yesterday posted something from Steve Orzel, who is working in Florida on essentially savanna systems. And so there's this remarkable, complex, unusual savanna habitat in Florida, rich with different types of palm species, C4 grasses, and they've been working a lot with fire regime and trying to understand what's going on there. And of course, the below ground is so important for survival and resprouting. And so he's got a great piece sort of talking about being a botanist and some of the work that he's done there, and that's associated with a recent publication working with Yitka as well, trying to describe more of the below ground. And there was also maybe a few weeks ago something on mycorrhiza work, and just some really interesting things that we've been able to talk about. And I really hope just to hear from more people and get to continue this conversation and look at all these different aspects of the below ground.
Yes, and of course, these illustrations you do are just fabulous. They're and I know you have very strong views about the role of artistically adventurous and cute representations. And do you get any sort of resistance from colleagues over this, or do people see the opportunity here for actually much more effective public engagement?
It's a mix, certainly, and I will say, so my work, my way of seeing artwork and sort of playing with visual media has always been very character focused, very story focused. And below ground storage organs and the lives of plants, I mean, they've got these complex stories, complex lives, and their lives are shown on their bodies. I mean, it's really a perfect tool, a perfect mechanism. You can count right now here's Andropogon giardia. You can see the nodes and the branching, and sort of how it's branched through its life, how it's clustered around itself. It's rather large C4 tussock grass in lots of prairies and different habitats in North America. And yeah, so it's a tussock, so it builds this huge protected tuft with all this leaf litter around itself, so it's able to survive both the high temperatures and also very low temperatures in where it's living. And so then I see that, and I see that struggle, and I want to put a face on it. And Yitka has been extremely supportive of this, and she is also a very, very talented and artistic person, and she does lino cuts, and so she has a lot of really wonderful work of hers, sort of describing and showing faces on plants and these different organs, and so there's definitely can be pushback, and there's very much a fear among many scientists to sort of an apprehension to teleology. So trying not to characterize things in a way that is inaccurate, which is I'm completely in favor of. But at the same time, as we are talking about visual media, you know, there are ways that we express and we can see things and understand things. And one of the wonderful tools that we have is anthropomorphism. It's expression, anthropomorphism, using human traits, human attributes on a new subject. It's a way of putting this language, it's truly like facial, expressive, emotive language onto a new subject, and a very distant subject from us. Like, plants are so different, so unusual. They're I want to say thought process again, maybe getting teleological, but yeah, the way that they do things and sort of are kind of making decisions is so slow, laborious, careful. It's just a completely different pace and type than we're used to and we understand. So I think that in this way, it's really great to put a face to the name, to see how they might be feeling and interpreting. So having them in adverse, unpleasant conditions and having a sad face, having them dormant and a sleepy face, one of my favorites to put. So I think that that's really great. And so it's using language, it's using symbols for people to understand. And I will say also, we know that plants don't really have faces in general, and putting the face there is a kind of pretense. It's kind of pretend. It's playful, and it's understood that children from very young age, they are able to have this imagination, this pretend life, and know very well that it's not real. And so I think that that's another aspect that we forget, that we underappreciate, that really we can't have both these things at once. It's very natural. It's a healthy way of understanding. And there's some really, really wonderful, fascinating work on sort of the philosophical and psychological aspect of this, Gabriella Aranti. And she calls it anthropomorphic interaction. And so certainly, so anthropomorphism can go to the negative side of anthropocentrism, of either sort of saying that the human-like is the best, and it's to sort of dominate and just use all other things, and or it can sort of be misunderstood and conveying emotion or different things where it's not there. A big common problem is evolution, wanting to say that evolution should be proceeding towards some sort of state as we understand should be the optimum, which that's not the point of evolution. That's not how it works. And so in contrast to that, she speaks of this anthropomorphic interaction. And it's where we take this human understanding and part of ourselves, and we see it in another object. So I'm staring at, as I'm speaking to you, I'm staring at a computer right now. And so, you know, a great example of someone working on the computer, like, why are you doing this to me? And you're saying this to the computer, and you're perhaps at your wit's end, but you know that the computer probably, hopefully, won't respond to you. but it's a way of taking control of the situation and in some ways relating to the object in front of you. And I think that this relationship is, yeah, a wonderful thing to have, very healthy if we can still do this with the appropriate kind of distance and understanding of the reality, which frankly, when you look at a plant, it's they're so different. I think it's easy to sort of keep these things together. And yeah, it's a part of where I see sort of the magic and mystery in the plant world. And I certainly have colleagues and other people who see this work and do appreciate it. Maybe it's not for everyone, not everyone's style, but I don't think I'm doing any damage. And I think that for those that can get a little bit extra sort of insight and relationship to it, I think that that's really great.
Great. Yes. No, it's all good stuff. More power to your elbow. Have we got any?
We have got some questions, but I'd like to jump in with one to start
Yes.
with, Curtis. And I mean, your illustrations are so charming and alluring, and I have to say, when I'm weeding my vegetable patch, I won't be quite as angry at the oxalis as from now on, because they drive me mad. But how do you use your illustrations? Do you use them for teaching? Do you use them for illustrating your work? Are they just, are they your expression of getting your expression out onto paper and having fun, or is there a practical role that they have within your work?
All of it. All
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there were a couple of pictures there actually that have been published. They have been part of actual diagrams. There's one this winter diagram, and then another one looking at sort of spreading and below ground investment in kind of three different, in that case it was disturbance regimes. And so yeah, I have had it published, and there's another picture there that has actually been on the cover of an issue of the scientific journal Functional Ecology when I had an article there a couple of years ago. So there are people there as well who are happy to see this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I use it in that case. I use it when I am giving talks, when I am making posters, when making different types of outreach material, sometimes even for students. So some of those black and white images that you saw there, those are actually coloring sheets that children can color.
Fantastic.
And yeah, I mean, really any kind of level and way to interact. And certainly a lot of these pieces are also to an extent for my own amusement.
Have you ever thought about animation?
So it would be lovely if someone could help with that. I don't maybe have the temperament.
Level.
Not the temperament for it, maybe.
Yeah. No, that would be fun. We have actually got a question kind of on that vein. Is Jennifer's asking, can you recommend a resource for beginners that describe the root systems for various plants, trees, shrubs, perennials, and so on? So is there anything that you can recommend
for beginners? And yeah, maybe would have some ideas on this as well, because there are some good gardening tools as well. I mean, that was a big inspiration. Noel mentioned looking through journals, and actually during my PhD, I would go to bookshops in sort of the discount section or the sales section of the library and look through gardening books and find just these really remarkable illustrations. There was even some illustrations from a book from the 70s, I believe, that I would frequently use in presentations because they were just such wonderful pictures of bulbs and these different structures. But yeah, so there's a lot of the work by Yitka Klimashova She does certainly have some articles that are describing this. Yeah, a lot of what I'm familiar with is maybe too dense. Certainly I'm working, I have some posters of mine sort of describing some of the different structures with very happy faces. So that's potentially a resource. I intend to post those sometime in the near future on the blog and
Right.
have more resources available. And that being said, if anyone has suggestions, I would really like to make that available on the blog so that more people
And actually that leads
can
us
find
on to a
these.
question. Tanya's asking, can we have a link to your blog? So what is
I'll put that on the YouTube channel.
right? But that means that everyone watching tonight has to watch again. Is it?
Yes, it'll be.
Is your blog easily
If you could share it on the.
you could share it now to everybody into
yeah.
the chat box, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, no problem.
And while you're doing that, Tanya has an extended question. Do you go to exhibitions? Do you follow artists' work, etc., as a source of visual inspiration? Did you take any training in visual art or are you an essential self-taught?
Yeah, so so my art background, I to an extent am classically trained in different particularly with different painting techniques, but a lot of these different things. So I took a lot of art history courses, including actually a history of Japanese painting, which is probably evident in my work. You know, there's that amazing history there, and also the level of creativity and expression in a lot of the work and paintwork, just even centuries ago, you know, looking at things from the 1800s and just still have these wide eyes and the ridiculous expressions in some of these things, just really, really amazing, amazing work. So, and yeah, then also I studied under some really amazing people, and I do try to keep up to some extent with what's going on. I go to galleries from time to time. There one yeah, there's a woman here who does work with actually figure work, a lot of sort of like almost like wooden toys. Teresa Talachova, working sort of as a designer under the word TTT, name TTT. She just really, really, really amazing work. And then more fine artists here as well. Monica Imrova does lots of work with cast iron and cement and these different like big heavy materials, and seeing wonderful work there. And there's many artists from Czech Republic working in these kinds of materials. I'm actually going to go to an exhibition that in Vienna in the near future that was inspired by soil.
Okay.
But yeah, unfortunately, I forget the name of that artist at the moment.
And it looks like you work across a range of different mediums. There's watercolor. It looks like acrylic or maybe oil. I mean,
yeah. So yeah. I did a lot of work with oil. I now mostly do a lot of these watercolor and sort of like India ink work.
Right.
And then also ceramics in a variety of different techniques with ceramics. And so those dolls, the plant dolls that you saw there, are really playing with the modularity of the plant body, which is really fun to work with.
And do you sell your artwork?
No, not typically. I'm doing okay, so I don't have to try too hard to sell things. I get by. But I'm not against it. And yeah, I like to display when possible, and I actually will have an exhibition along with Jitka Klimashova, her work, having some of her printings of her liner cuts in Pruhanitsa Park in September.
Oh, fantastic.
So a way of kind of showing our inspiration and expression with plants. But yeah, there's some really remarkable work out there. that is still being done, and yeah, I try to appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's lovely to see your approach, a
Yeah.
really fresh and engaging approach. So it's really it's wonderful. Yeah, thank you very
On
much.
the subject of going underground, Annie flagged up before the next Surge Hill Plant Library Day.
Mm.
I will be involved for various family health reasons. I can't actually be there physically, but we're talking about my doing a Zoom presentation and getting people out there looking at plants at ground level. And I'll certainly be sharing a lot of this whole collection of imagery I've got from Poland, and I'll be doing likewise at the Beth Chatto Symposium at the end of August. I'll be doing a presentation on underground. So I think it's one of those kind of zeitgeist things. Increasing numbers of us are beginning to kind of look at what's going on underground and to communicate that generally within our community. So, Curtis, thank you so much for that. That was a real fresh air, and
thank you, Curtis. It was
very
absolutely
much
beautiful.
look forward to keeping in touch with you. And also, I did speak to Jitka Klimashova some time ago, and we did talk about the possibility of her doing a workshop in Britain. The plant library would be a very good place to do it.
Well, let's talk to them.
So Jitka was very much, Jitka wasn't. I couldn't persuade her to come on Thursday Garden Chat, as academics like to do things kind of properly, like a week. But no, she was very, very amenable to working with us. So we will soon be learning much more about roots, which I'm
well, maybe we can get Curtis over here as well, or we come to you. We were talking about going to.
Yes, we were talking about doing Czech gardens. Yes.
Lovely.
Great. Okay, well, thank you so much,
Curtis.
Thank you so much. It's so much fun. Thank you, really.
Well, it's been lovely, absolutely lovely, and thanks everyone for joining us. And see you again. Take care. Bye. Bye.
We hope that you are enjoying this recording from Garden Masterclass's Thursday Garden Chat programme. We started doing this in April 2020 during the first COVID lockdown, when we did it 5 days a week for 2 months, which was a wonderful experience. Since then, we've carried on doing it just for one session a week. We have always done this as a public service. We initially started it as a morale booster for the garden and landscape industry during a very difficult time, and we've so loved doing it that we've carried on doing this. But our presenters give their time for free. We give our time for free. We do incur costs, administrative, technical, and sometimes for support staff, and we would very much appreciate the odd donation to help us keep going and help keep this a free service, which we'd very much like to do. So please go to our homepage, and down at the bottom there's a donate button, and we'll be very grateful. Thank you.